It's now my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Jaymes Boland-Rudder and also Emily Latu from the NRL. So if they could join me on the stage. Mr. Jaymes has got a very extensive CV. He's worked in government and more recently in the NRL. He was actually responsible for finding the funding for $250 million to build the Townsville Stadium. So regional and rural is really important, and we're now going to hear what the NRL is doing to support our rural communities.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you to all the delegates here for affording us the time to speak with you and my good friend and colleague Emily Latu as well. To begin, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. The NRL does a lot of work in rural and regional New South Wales. Apologies, I needed the clicker. That's all right. And a lot of our fan base is based in rural and regional Australia, which is fantastic. So I thought today that what I'd spend a little bit of time doing is taking you around some of the metrics that we look to guide our sport, our strategic focus over the next 5 years, and also speak at length in terms of the community work that we do, predominantly in rural and regional communities across Australia. And it links in with the one of the things that the previous speaker was talking about in terms of a social licence to operate. And we see the work that we do in regional communities as giving us that social licence because they give so much to our sport at the elite level. So for us at the NRL, a big guide is how many fans we have across the country. And we've got almost 8 million fans, which is very exciting. And admittedly, a lot of those are East Coast centric. But what we've found is the fastest growth for us has been in the non-traditional states of Victoria and Western Australia. We've seen growth this year of approximately 1.1%, which is really encouraging. And when we look at that number of almost 8 million, what we do know is about half of those are based in rural and regional communities. And one of the things we want our fans to be doing and our members to be doing is to be promoters of our sport. And we've taken a lot of time to focus in on this and think about the promotional piece. We measure, NPS stands for Net Promoter Score, and we measure the people's advocacy for our sport. And to be honest, it goes up and down. But the trajectory over the last 18 months has been really positive. 18 months ago, we had more detractors than promoters. This year, at the end of the season, we ended at a +8, which is something that's really positive. And when looked at in the context of other sports, we're ranked at the moment number 3 across the country. The two sports that have more promoters than us currently are AFL and cricket. Membership for us. So what do we offer people? There's an opportunity to become a member of a community, a member of a sporting community, and we've really focused on that, and we've seen growth this year of approximately 5%. So we've now got, in terms of membership of our NRL clubs, almost 350,000 members of those clubs. Our crowds this year have grown by approximately 4%, which is really positive, but we have to admit that it's from a reasonably low base. Interestingly, one of the things that we get criticised for, and we'd very much appreciate this room's support of, is when we take our games into regional centres. This year we played 3 in regional New South Wales, and likewise we played 3 in regional Queensland. Those facilities have smaller capacities, and as a result our crowd numbers go down, and so there's this perverse relationship between a desire to grow our game and reward our fans in regional centres, yet the overall metrics and success by which a professional sport is measured is based on your overall crowd numbers. So whilst we'd have 100% capacity in Mudgee with a crowd of 10,000, that actually reduces your average crowd attendances. So it's this perverse challenge that we face, and the more people that are advocating and pushing for us to take content into regional areas is really important for us. So when you think about sport, you get measured by bums on seats and eyeballs on television on that professional side. And so this year we've seen 1.1% growth in our TV audience, which sounds small, and we've seen a small decline in Australia only. But when you look at it in the broader context of what's happening in the television broadcast, we have had a phenomenal year. We've maintained our share. We've actually grown our share versus the other competitor sports, so who've all seen significant declines of somewhere between approximately 15 and 20%. So for us, in terms of that eyeballs piece, it's been really important. And what we've seen in rural and regional Australia is the eyeballs are the strongest there. People tuning into major events like State of Origin or Grand Final, through to regular premiership games. We, as a sport, are the sport that's most dominant in rural and regional Australia, and it's something that we're incredibly proud of, and it recognises that affinity that we have with those communities. The reality of the way professional sport has been distributed is traditionally via free-to-air television or subscription television, but something that everyone experiences is the challenging nature of the changing digital world. That impacts us as a sport in terms of the way people consume. And for us, though, it's a major opportunity. We've invested a lot of money in building out a digital business, and what we've seen is the way people are consuming sport has changed quite significantly. This year we've had a 50% growth in the number of people streaming their matches live on their mobile phone, and the live pass subscriptions have grown by well over 40%. So it shows us that there's these changing habits in the way that people consume. We embarked on this digital build at the start of this year, and we had a goal over a 5-year period to have 800,000 individual subscribers. We hit that within 9 months. It shows that we've got a really compelling product there. And what the opportunity that sits alongside that is for us to then know and understand those consumers, those 800,000 people, in a really unique fashion. 98.5% of those people have nominated who their favourite team is and where they live, so that we can communicate to them about things that are of interest. But importantly also for this group, and we'll move to it in a moment, is that social licence piece, the piece where we can then use those platforms to deliver really important messages and engage with our fans. We did something this year with the National Farmers Federation, Rotary and Rural Aid to look at how can we engage those people and raise money to support rural and regional communities through this really tough period of drought. And using our digital platforms was a incredibly important component of that. We're lucky enough to have the largest social media following of any Australian sporting organisation. Across the various channels, about 2.5 million people are regularly engaged with the NRL. And that 2.5 million does not account for the people who may decide that they like a particular player and follow a player on their Instagram account, or they like a particular club. That's just following the NRL code in itself. If you multiply that out and look at people who are engaged with the sport in some way or another on social media platforms, you actually hit a number of 9 million. And that 9 million, when you think about it in the context of there's 12 million people with Facebook accounts in this country, is quite a remarkable number. So we've got this unique ability to communicate with our fans and our members. So that's kind of the, I guess, sport as a business side, and then there's sport as a sports side, and we don't want to lose sight of that. And in terms of that, it's measured by how many people are playing your sport. And for us and for most sports, this is a real challenge. People now, when they're assessing what they do with their leisure time, their spare time, less and less people are playing organised sport. There's been increases in people playing computer games, playing individual pursuits, I guess it'd be best described as, people going for a walk or going for an individual run. So for us this year to see growth of 3.5% across the country was really encouraging. In regional Australia, that growth was actually over-indexed at 5%, and the fastest area we're seeing growth is in female participation. Admittedly, it's from a low base, but for the last 5 years, each year we've grown at 25% plus in terms of female participation. This year it was at 29%. Which is something that's really encouraging, but does present unique challenges. And those challenges, I think, are most personified in regional Australia, where facilities have not historically been built for female participation in team sport. And it's something that we're proud to do a lot of work in conjunction with local councils, state and federal governments to address. So that's kind of the major metrics that we measure ourselves on. And then our strategic plan over the next 5 years is pretty simple, pretty clear. We want to unite communities, we want to excite our fans, and we want to inspire individuals. So the unite section is how do we get more people playing, boys, girls, men, women, in any format of our sport. Touch, tag or tackle. The excite pillar is literally about that entertainment side. How do we be the number one entertainment option? And we need to measure ourselves not only against other sports, but other entertainment propositions like Netflix, like going to a theme park. And most importantly, how do we inspire communities to be better individuals, better communities, stronger communities? So there's a little bit of detail under each pillar there, but the major call-outs sit there. And I'm going to go into some more detail now in terms of that inspire pillar, looking at the work that we do in rural and regional communities and the focus areas we've got there. So rather than try and be all things to all people, we've been really clear about what we want to do with our sport. We want to help build healthy communities, respectful communities, and educated communities. And we've got some marquee programs under each of those pillars. In the health pillar, state of mind is a major focus, and that's our mental health program, which I'll speak about. The respect pillar is the area that Emily will speak about in terms of respectful relationships and preventing domestic violence. And our learn pillar, it's focused on school to work, a program that transitions Indigenous students from education into employment. So in the health pillar, unfortunately, something we see within our rugby league family and in rugby league communities is the affliction of mental illness, and it manifests itself in suicide. It's horrible to know that 3,500 people die each year. So in that respect, we invest a lot of money going around working with local communities, local groups to try and address that. We've got a Learn program that works with about 500 Indigenous students each year, transitioning them from high school into employment and also the further education that's needed. It's a highly successful program. It's won international awards for literally being the best community program run by sports in the world. It's something I'm very proud of. Unfortunately, time means that we won't go into it. And then there's a program called Voice Against Violence, and we'll just watch a quick video on that.
I had two brothers, an older and younger brother, and a really supportive family. The thing that I loved most about my childhood was rugby league time. Being able to play with my mates. Everywhere I went, there was a footy in my hands. A lot of the things that were instilled in me as a young man still stick and resonate with everything that I do today. But at the end of school, I had an opportunity to go to a couple of clubs, and the Raiders in particular showed some interest there. I remember travelling down, and it was like a big country town, really. And growing up in a small rural community, it seemed the right fit. So I came down as an 18-year-old, and I was fortunate enough in 2000 to debut for the club. And there was an exodus of players at the end of 2006, and all of a sudden I was in an opportunity where I got to captain the side. And it wasn't through being the greatest player on the field, that wasn't it. I just think that I really believed in the club culture. I really believed in the values.
Alan Tom, has he done it all himself? Yes, he has!
When I finished in 2011, I had an opportunity to become an NRL ambassador. The Voice Against Violence program has been designed to create awareness with our young 16, 18-year-old junior footballers. I hope at the end of this program that the young men will understand some of the statistics, some of the problems that we have in our community, and it's important that we do that. We acknowledge that we do have a problem and we need to address it.
Right, here we go. Come out with your partner, get in, we'll get in a bit of a circle around here a bit.
We use rugby league drills that I used as an NRL player. And we use those drills to help educate and raise awareness. All of a sudden, something that was never addressed, was a taboo topic, is now something that is common language, and we speak about it and we understand the impact that it is having on our people.
So you're going to go back?
So I'm just going to flick through, in the interest of time, that video. Alan is former captain of the Canberra Raiders, and his father is actually the president of the National Farmers branch up in Tamworth. So he's from rural regional Australia and does most of his work in regional communities with Emily, using rugby league as that tool to drive change, to deliver messages around the prevention of domestic violence. And I'll just invite Emily over to talk about some of the work that she's done this year with communities.
Thank you, James. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we meet today. I have the great honour and privilege of working with Alan Tongue and former players, as well as Maddie Ballin and Clinton Tupy, in coordinating the NRL's Voice Against Violence program. The NRL's Voice Against Violence program is an educational program, a primary prevention program of domestic violence, in using rugby league as an educational tool to educate our young men and women in our communities about gender equality and eradicating domestic violence in our communities. I've had the great privilege this year to work across 67 clubs. We work primarily with our junior rugby league clubs, grassroots communities across Australia. We've had the privilege of working with 67 of those clubs, and 55 of those clubs have been in regional communities in Australia, primarily in Queensland and New South Wales, working with Alan Tongue and Maddie Ballin and Clinton Tupy. Two of those I'd like to highlight is one in Queensland. We went up to the South Burnett community in Queensland, around Mergen, Kingaroy and Cherbourg, taking our Voice Against Violence program up there. We were invited by the communities to share that program in line with the domestic violence round with their junior rugby league club. And then we went to New South Wales Moree communities, so Moree, Narrabri, Warialda, and taking our program there. We speak about it a lot of the time that you could take this message down to a community and say that we're going to speak about domestic violence, and sometimes we won't get anyone in the room. But if you attach that rugby league component of using rugby league and using the sport, a lot of our people in our communities really gravitate to, we know that we're going to get the message across. And we work with men, young men, 16 to 18 years old, because we know that we aren't the experts in this space, but our backyard is rugby league, and a lot of the people that we can reach will take that message from their rugby league clubs and schools, and then the ripple effect of those messages will continue into their schools, communities, and society as well. But we know that a lot of the impact is after we leave. They're going to take these messages, these young men take these messages of our Voice Against Violence program of speaking out, standing up, and taking action. So first is standing up to acknowledge that there is an issue of gender-based violence in our community and in Australia. And then two, speaking out, knowing that there is an issue in Australia, and using our platform of rugby league and the NRL's profile to bring awareness to the problem. And three, taking action, using our stance, using our profile, and using rugby league to make changes in our communities. I know this is challenging in our communities to speak about domestic violence, but it's a continuing process of speaking about it. And I know we're running out of time, but really passionate about this space. And I know we have Alan Tongue, who's always an advocate for this program in Canberra and Australia-wide. And I think our communities, regionally especially, have been really accepting of the program, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. Thank you. I hand it over to JB.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Emily. And just wanted to conclude by thanking each of you as representatives of your local communities for the support that we get. The support that we get, whether it be by welcoming our sport into a local community or through the sponsorship we receive from other people to further our reach. So thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity, and I'll hand over.
Thank you very much, James and Emily. Emily did a particularly good job summing up, and you can see that you're passionate, both of you, about what you do. Some of the really quick key things that I pulled out of it is that there's a huge change in the digital world. So we've heard about tech. Rugby NRL is also acknowledging that the tech space and the digital online space is improving. And I also really loved in your video, the gentleman said that you have to believe in the culture and the values of what you're doing, because then anything's possible. And what I really like is that you're using NRL, which is this really cool platform, to talk about some really serious issues. And I think that's how we're going to get breakthrough. So thank you very, very much. Please join me in thanking James and Emily.